Okay. The description of the creation finishes in the first three verses of chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and on the seventh day God finished his work and which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day. God doesn't need to rest. And hallowed it, because on it God rested from all his work which he had done in the creation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. This description of the seventh day calls for some comment. Firstly, the meaning of the certain words. The text is taken from the Revised Standard Version of the Bible mentioned above. Where am I here? Okay. The word host signifies here, in all probability, the multitude of beings created. As for the expression he rested, it is a matter of translating the Hebrew words Shabbath, from which the Jewish day for rest is derived, hence the expression in English Sabbath. It is quite clear that the rest that God is said to have taken after the 6 days' work is a legend. There is nevertheless an explanation for this. We must bear in mind that the so-called description of the creation examined here is taken from the so-called sacerdotal version written by priests and scribes who were where am I here? Who were spiritual successors of Ezekiel, the prophet of the exile to Babylonian, writing in the 6th century BC. We have already seen how the priests took the Yahwist and the Elohist versions of Genesis and remodeled them after their own fashion in accordance with their own preoccupations. Father de Vaux has written that the legalist character of these writings was very essential. An outline of this has already been given above. Whereas the Yahwist text of the creation, written several centuries before the sacerdotal text, makes no mention of God's Sabbath, taken after the fatigue of a week's labor. Because God does not get tired. He's not human. Okay? The authors of the sacerdotal text bring it into their description. They decide the latter into separate days with the very precise indication of the days of the week. They build it around the Sabbatic day of rest, which they have to justify to the faithful by pointing out that God was the first to respect it. No, we don't do that. Hold on. I just lost my place again. Okay. Subsequent to this practical necessity, the description that follows has an apparently logical religious order, but in fact, scientific data permits us to qualify the latter as being of a whimsical nature. Yani a joke. The idea that successive phases of the creation, as seen by the sacerdotal authors, in their desire to incite people to religious observation, could not have been compromised to the space of 1 week as one that cannot be defended from a scientific point of view. Today, we are perfectly aware that the formation of the universe and the earth took place in stages that lasted for very long periods. Even if the description came to a close on the evening of the sixth day, without mentioning the seventh day, the Sabbath, when God is said to have rested, and even if, as in the Quranic description, we were permitted to think that they were in fact undefined periods rather than actual days, the sacerdotal description would still not be any more acceptable. The succession the succession of episodes it contains is in absolute contradiction with elementary scientific knowledge. It may be therefore that the sacerdotal description of the creation stands out as an imaginative and ingenious fabrication. Its purpose was quite different from that of making known the truth. You know, I don't see how anybody could have the guts and the audacity to write words and say they're from God when in fact they're not. I mean, that's like one of the worst sins anybody could ever do. Okay. The second description of the creation in Genesis follows immediately upon the first without comment or transitional passage. It does not invoke the same objections. We must remember that this description is roughly 3 centuries older and is very short. It allows more space to the creation of man and earthly paradise than to the creation of the earth and the heavens. It mentions this very briefly. In the day that Yahweh, God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet on the earth, and no herb in the field had yet sprung up, for Yahweh God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the ground, but a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Then Yahweh formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into the nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living thing. This is the Yahwist text that appears in the texts of present day Bibles. The sacerdotal text was added to it later, but one may ask if it was originally so brief. Nobody is in a position to say whether the Yahwist text has not, in the course of time, been pared down. We do not know if the few lines we possess represent all that the oldest biblical text of the creation had to say.